All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. Please click like and click subscribe. That's the most important thing you can do. If you like what I'm doing here, the most important thing you can do to help me keep this going and hopefully at some point monetize the live stream is by clicking subscribe. So I would greatly appreciate it if you do that. I was a little disappointed to start today's program by the fact that I don't have a guest. I had a guest lined up, and unfortunately, she called in sick or she emailed in sick. I'm really, really hopeful we'll get her on shortly. There is a connection with the guest. She is a producer and host on the program Interfaith Voices. And those who remember the old KRXA radio station in Monterey will remember fondly the Interfaith Voices show that aired, I believe it was every Saturday. I'd have to go back and look at the schedule if I can even find it. But I know we carried an hour of Interfaith Voices, their hour. They did an hour, and they still do. So I was hoping to talk to Amberine about that and her work there. I don't know if she was connected with Interfaith Voices in 2014 when I ultimately sold the station, but I would like to discuss Interfaith Voices with her, although that was not the reason. The reason we connected was to promote an event tomorrow in the DC area. It is a virtual event, but it will be I guess centered or broadcast out of, hosted on Zoom from the DC area. And I made a real point when I got an invitation to this to really look into it. A friend of mine actually connected me to this group, the Council, Interfaith Council of Metropolitan Washington, and specifically Communities United Against Hate, for the virtual dialogue they're having tomorrow evening on Islamophobia. They actually had one on anti-Semitism in October, and now they're following up with a dialogue that will address the challenges and specifically the hatred that Muslim communities in our area, that is the area I live now, of course, Montgomery County, Maryland, are facing. So I really wanted to discuss that in great detail with Amberine. Unfortunately, she cannot make it today. I hope we can get her to, in the next few weeks, because this is such an important topic. Now, I'm on record as saying that I think that Islamophobia, hatred, anti-Muslim hate is a far greater problem, certainly that it's been documented as far more serious than anti-Semitism, at least where I live, at least based on my observations. And I stand by that. I understand that the Interfaith Council has also done a dialogue on anti-Semitism, and there certainly have been claims that anti-Semitism is on the rise in the wake of the Israeli genocidal activities in Gaza. But I just don't really see it. I don't see the evidence of it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in today's program. Also, maybe we'll touch on what's happening in the academic world at the end of the program, really just more following up on the Claudine Gay situation and other institutions, higher institutions of academia that I think are failing our children, our youth, our young people. So we'll get into that. And really kind of a broader theme, if you want to look at it in today's program, is really just my personal animus towards those claiming victim status. I really find that so objectionable, especially privileged people, especially people who are living well, who have more, much often in many, many cases, much more than just about anybody else, many more opportunities, and yet they wrap themselves in the mantle of victimhood. And I find this incredibly annoying, irritating. You can't really deal with it a lot of the times. I see this in family members, co-religionists, extended family members, I want to say. I don't want to just, make this identifiable, but people always portraying themselves as victims. And I find this so incredibly frustrating and annoying. So, and it's so counterproductive. I think we get where we want to go when we empathize with people who are different than we are, who are members of, if you will, other tribes. If we say, okay, I get where you're coming from, I see why you're upset, and then maybe you analogize that. If you want to analogize the suffering of the Gazans to the struggles that Jews have faced against powerful enemies over the years, please be my guest. Don't ignore or elide the fact that Jewish people have in fact been victims in the past. But don't claim now somehow, because there was a terrorist attack on October 7th, that the crimes that Hamas committed are somehow analogous. On that date, what they did are somehow analogous to the decades-long persecution, oppression of the Palestinian people, which has led to many-fold more deaths than Hamas has brought about. So I just cannot repeat enough my insistence that we must be willing to look at the other side and also examine our own claims, our own people, and say, are they really right? Is this really true? And this goes for in every aspect, whether it's, those who claim, oh, well, I'm a Democrat, so I'm superior morally to the knuckle draggers in the Republican Party. And I'm not talking about Republican elites. I'm just saying rank and file voters. Please try to set aside your sense of moral superiority and condemnation of others. So yeah, I'll be at this event. By the way, the link is in the description, and everyone's welcome. So if you can make the Communities United Against Hate event tomorrow evening, I hope you will, and I'll see you there. I wanted to really get into the question of and I've been told this is divisive, right? Why can't both Jews and Palestinians, why can't Jews and Muslims both be victims? Why do you have to say, well, one is more of a victim than the other? And I don't have to say it. I say it because it's true. Because I think that when Jewish people are confronted with what many Jews, now I don't want to, I'm stereotyping, obviously. So this isn't, and I'm Jewish, right? So I don't do this. But many Jewish people, certainly people that I know, and I've seen this over and over in my social media responses to my social media and to others, when confronted with the indisputable evidence of the evil that Israel is committing, the Jewish state is committing, the response is invariably, well, what about what happened on October 7th? Don't you condemn that? Or can Israel needs to be safe. So if you're going to claim somehow that there's some kind of moral equivalency, then let's look into that and see if it's true. Is it accurate? And let me play a couple of videos. So here's a video of an event that occurred in just I'm going to guess less than 10 miles from my house in Rockville, Maryland. And I'm disappointed again not to have Amberine here, because this goes to exactly the issue that we were going to discuss, and that is anti-Semitism not anti-Semitism, Muslim hate or Islamophobia in our region. So here's a video. Let's listen to it. And I hope I may, as is always my want, I will cut into it and stop and pause it to try to explain things. And fortunately, there is a crawl, so you'll be able to, I hope, get the closed captions. And we'll compare this to some other events where Jewish people have claimed that they are themselves victims of anti-Semitism.
Brooklyn is my town. Fuck off.
All right, so pardon the French, but there's a lot of obscenities from the folks yelling and screaming in this video, and you can see there, America's ours, we'll protect America. They cut it, they had an F and then a couple of stars, CK off.
We will protect America. We will secure America against your enemies.
Okay, so the Israelis, and it's not just one or two people, there's probably 10, 15 people. They were confronting a ceasefire now. This occurred, if you can read it closely, pro-Israeli counter-protesters at ceasefire peace rally in Rockville on November 5th. So this is about a month. And one of the things I was looking at is, can we sort of excuse these protesters for their ugly language, the horrible bigotry, animals, traitors is what they're calling those insisting on a ceasefire, saying we need a ceasefire. Maybe there can be some of them were carrying Palestine flags. Maybe there's an excuse, maybe there's a justification or an understand, because I've heard people say, well, you need to understand everyone. So I really, really try. Though it's hard for me to have too much. I can understand, but it's hard for me to be accepting anyway of people who are going to call another group of people animals and traitors. But okay, was this right in the way? Because this is in the days following October 7. And I made the point, I'm not going to sit here and say, we have to condemn Hamas. We have to condemn everyone equally. Not at all. Hamas is representing victims of those who are being persecuted. I think, the terrorist act obviously is incredibly lamentable. It's horrible. They killed innocent people to the extent that, any kind of cruelty, there's no defense. It was awful, but it's not proportional. It has to be understood in context of a group of people who are being kept in a concentration camp, and they're going to lash out. And it's kind of like, it's not even the same quite as 9/11, although there is a little bit of, remember, the chickens have come home to roost. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit what happened on October 7 as well. But no, I absolutely condemn Hamas. But what are they supposed to do? What can they do to bring attention, to get the world to take on to help defend the Palestinians against what is now genocide? So I was thinking, well, maybe this happened right after October 7. So of course you're going to be especially raw. You're going to feel especially upset if you have relatives in Israel. Maybe one of your family members or a friend was murdered by Hamas at that music event, or they're hostages. So I get it. I would get that, but this is a month already. This is a month long after Israel had started its bombing campaign against civilians, started telling folks, go to the southern Gaza, and then bombing them there, hitting hospitals. I don't know the entire timeline, but Israel had already begun its murderous reprisals against innocent Gazans. So there's no way to just simply excuse what these haters, these Muslim haters, the anti-Muslim haters, there's no way to excuse it on the grounds of, well, they are, temporarily deranged because of what happened in Israel. You'll never live again. We'll take your heads. This is what the pro-Israel demonstrates. There's no way to see this as anything but pure hate, pure anti-Muslim hate. I think he says we are right. It says we are white. You are murderers. He's saying this to the protesters, the ceasefire now ralliers.
Where you came from? Go! You are not welcome here. Brooklyn is my town. Fuck off! Go away!
Get your hands off of him.
All right, so now, and all they're holding flags for the country that's under barrage, Palestine. Okay, so there it is. There, right there. There's no way to paint this as anything but pure hatred of Muslims, of Palestinians. It's the rankest, ugliest Islamophobia, Muslim hate. This is what is going on in our country today. And I've got other videos too, I'll show you.
Get your hands off me.
Nothing. They are against America. These are terrorists.
I thought that was ironic. I won't say funny like haha, but ironic. he uses that F word there. You know, I try really hard. I don't like to say slurs. I don't say the N word, I don't say the F word. I don't like to say the K word about Jews. There's some slurs that are so ugly, I'm not going to say them. So I thought this was kind of ironic. He uses the F word, you Fs, we will live in Gaza. Because one of the arguments, and in fact, I had a family member say this to me, and I've seen this also from the trans community, we have to support Israel because of what Hamas does to trans people, because of the pink washing, right? Israel has painted itself as a great place for gay couples to vacation. And I don't know, maybe it is, I don't know. But it's ironic because you see just the veneer, just under that veneer of pink washing, the obvious homophobia from this pro-Israel, the Zionist protester. So if your argument, if you're saying to yourself, well, you know, Israel, at least you can have gay marriage and Hamas hates gay people. If that's your rationale for siding with Israel, think again. The hatred that is presented here, it's not limited to Muslims or Palestinians. It's not even ultimately triggered. Maybe, I mean, I'm not going to say there isn't fear. I'm sure he is afraid, that man. But there's just this raw hatred, this desire, as he says, to kill. We will and colonize. We will live in Gaza. So that's in our communities right now. This is in a progressive, democratic city right outside Washington, D.C., and there's a decent number of people there rallying. So we will, and I'll let me see. I want to get that there because I wasn't playing, but so you can see that last. Let me just show that for you. That last slide there with we will remove Gaza from the earth. I mean, this is what Muslims face. If you are inclined to be pro-Israel, and that's fine, you can be, but don't don't pretend that it's the Jewish supporters of Israel who are the real victims here, or who are facing real hate, because it's just not the case. And we'll compare in just a moment. So if you want to say, well, they're not colonizers, they're not, Israel's not genocidal. Maybe they're not. That guy is. There's no question about it. That guy is. I got some other videos. I want to play before I get to more Muslim hate, anti-Muslim hate. Let's compare and contrast what it's like for Jews, because Jewish people are also claiming, and that they're victims, that anti-Semitism is alive and well, and they're very justifiably afraid. So are they facing anything? Do we see something comparable? We'll stay in the same general region. This is the University of Maryland, where my son, proud Terp, great university. And I want to put in a big plug here for state schools. After what we've seen with the private, the debacle at Harvard, where they hired someone who wasn't qualified, and then they fired her because of pressure from billionaire donors. I mean, the whole thing is just ugly. Somebody who was not a supporter, not a champion of a Palestinian speech, who was bent over backwards to accommodate billionaire and multimillionaire donors, and wasn't qualified, and yet gets fired because she didn't accommodate them quite enough. Let's give a quick cheer. Not that the state schools are, there's plenty of their way these state colleges and universities are so driven by their sports, their pro sports teams is just absolutely disgusting. But there's something to be said for them, for some of the independence that they have from the big donor class. All right, here's the University of Maryland. Wanted to play. This is back in November as well. Let's see if we can get this thing to work. Here we go.
For University of Maryland Jewish student Karen Binyamin, this wasn't her first time attending an event hosted by students from...
All right, so this is a rally here that was for, again, the Palestinians at the University of Maryland. And you heard it start out with Intifada now, and that is, Intifada means uprising. And I know some Israelis, some Jewish advocates claim that that is a call for genocide. The word means uprising. It doesn't mean genocide. You want to interpret it to mean what you want it to interpret, fine. But they're not saying, let's kill all the Jews, which is exactly what we heard at the Rockville rally. So let's hear what is claimed to be, perceived to be, alleged to be anti-Semitism.
For justice in Palestine.
There was a lot more anger.
But she said Thursday's protest was different.
They said from the river to the sea a number of times, unapologetic.
Right. Oh my God, the river to the sea. So according to this student, that is what, for her, was terrible anti-Semitism. The phrase, from the river to the sea. It's not F off, Fs. It's not we will take your land. It's not we will cut off your heads. It's not we will take your land. It's from the river to the sea. That's what so upset the student. And I guess you could say, and I want to, again, because that can be interpreted, all right, the river to the sea, we're going to take the land. But the expression is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Who objects to freedom? See, that's where the call is for freedom. It's for liberation. And the people who are calling for it are indeed not free. They are indeed imprisoned. They haven't got freedom of movement. They haven't got economic justice. So the call from the river to the sea seems completely appropriate under the circumstances.
Apologetically, as a Jewish student there in the crowd and as an Israeli citizen, I was terrified.
The group held a protest calling for a ceasefire in Palestine, but someone decided to write out anti-Semitic messages on the ground like this one.
There's a firm line between criticism of Israel that I might not agree with versus crossing the line into anti-Semitism. And I think it is beyond question that yesterday crossed that line. Just to see someone so firmly believe things to an extent that they feel comfortable writing it down publicly, really just made me feel, as a Jew, not welcome.
In a letter, the university says the offensive actions of a few should not reflect on the vast majority of protesters who were there to peacefully express their views.
I don't get why that student was afraid. There's no call for her to be beheaded. There's no call for her land to be taken. And the Holocaust sign there that's chalked in there, I'll just show it one more time. The Holocaust that's chalked there, that reflects the claim, the accurate claim by the Palestinian supporters that there's a Holocaust going on right now in Gaza. Not that the Holocaust didn't occur in the 1940s, or that there should be another one against Jews. They're saying there's a Holocaust now, which is accurate in Gaza. Go ahead, sir.
I saw yesterday. I barely, I basically, the only news I get about the conflict in Gaza is from YouTube, mostly Al Jazeera. And I saw that the Israelis basically vaporized a carload of journalists yesterday. And again, they did it again. And last week I wrote a letter to Jimmy Panetta and said, an email and said, you gotta stand up against this. You gotta speak out against this, even if it's not politically expedient for you. has gotten really bad, and I think it's going to cost you in the long run if you don't, speak out against this. And I haven't heard back from them. I selected the option that I wanted to hear back from them. I haven't heard back from them. I think these things take time, but I just this is like beyond embarrassing,
Well, it's a moral. It's a moral. It's a moral crisis. It's an absolute. It is like a Holocaust. It is a Holocaust. I mean, what Israel's doing in Gaza is atrocities. And I I'm put you on the spot. I know you support Biden, and there's an argument. I think it's a good argument, or a fair one anyway, that Trump would be even worse than Biden. But how can you be a supporter of Biden given the fact that he has offered really no real resistance to what Netanyahu has done? I understand there's been talk. I understand all that, but the U.S. government could stop this, and Joe Biden could stop this, and he's not.
Yeah, well, it's my reason is that it's politics, not unitics. I don't go into the ballot box thinking about one issue. Some people do, but I'm not one of them. I really, the thing that concerns me most is the extent to which Republicans are trying to game the electoral system. There is a point at which it will be game over if we continue allowing this to happen. They will gerrymander this country to a point, and I don't think anybody has the guts to stand up to them to ungerrymander it. To literally, at some point, it's going to take force to do it, and I don't think anybody has the guts to stand up to them. So I feel that once they reach, that tipping point, that they're going to, we will effectively have an autocracy here, and we're really close to it already.
I mean, I think we're sort of there. See, I guess where you and I might part ways is I kind of feel like, again, you have two sides of the same coin running the government. It doesn't really matter. I just don't see a difference. Either way, we support genocide.
Yeah, you sound like somebody that doesn't care if their Social Security check doesn't show up. You got a little something, a little safety net to fall into beyond that. And most of us aren't in that position.
Yeah, John, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but then I could say, well, you sound like someone who doesn't care if your job is exported to Asia. I mean, I could make these arguments. Barack Obama proposed cutting Social Security.
Mm-hmm. Not to the extent. Wait. I don't believe you. I'm sorry, but I don't.
Well, that's the news. I mean, I'm just repeating what I think. This was reported widely in 2012. Before the 2012 election, he proposed changing the way the cost of living increases are calculated, which would have led to significant reductions in payouts.
Okay, that was Paul Ryan that proposed that, and that was Obama. Basically resigned to the fact that he would have to capitulate to these people because a bunch of stupid Americans were electing them. And he was basically telling the American people, look, okay, you put these guys in charge. Look, I'm working with them. But that was Paul Ryan, and that was called change CPI. And what they wanted to do was make they wanted the cost of living increases to reflect that people would make choices in the products that they would abandon certain products like beef for chicken because chicken is cheaper. And they wanted basically because if the price of beef keeps going up, that's going to drive the cola up, right? And so Barack Obama, what he did was say, look, here I am. I'm willing to work with these guys. You put them into power. Here I am working with them. Here, you get your Social Security cut that you voted for, American people. Here you go. So the way you present it, Hal, is very, very disingenuous.
Okay, well, I don't know. I'm not arguing that the Republicans are often worse in many issues, but if your issue is Social Security, it's important to understand that Democrats also have been willing to put Social Security on the block. And when it comes to saving Social Security, there are things the Democrats could do that they will not do, such as call for lifting the limit on when taxes are collected on Social Security, right? It's like at 120,000 or some income or something, they stop the FICA. So why not lift that, But Democrats never propose that. So I mean, it's the Democrats fight just hard enough to lose on many issues.
Well, you make a very good point, but the outcome of these elections is significant, and also if your issue is the makeup of the Supreme Court, then that's another good reason for somebody to go in and support Democrats if you're worried about civil rights being trampled. So, I mean, I think compare and contrast the people who are appointed by Democratic and Republican presidents, and you're going to see a stark contrast between them.
I think that on balance, there are more issues where the Democrats aren't as bad. There are some issues that are really important to me where the Democrats are awful. Trump talked about trade to a degree that no Democrat has talked about in many, many years, except for Bernie Sanders, who was my first choice. Trump also has called out the military-industrial complex, and I think rightly so. So there are issues where Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't want us to be providing aid to Ukraine. I agree with her there. I know you very vehemently disagree, but that's an issue that I feel as strongly about almost as any other. This is a terrible, terrible thing that we're doing, supporting the war in Ukraine. So we can disagree on some issues. I think the Democrats are very bad on many issues. And yes, there's somewhere they're better. And I'm not voting for Republicans, but I'm not going to just vote for somebody because the alternative might be worse on more issues, John. They're both terrible, in my opinion. All right, you got the final word. I'm going to let you go because I want to move on. I only have about 20 more minutes left.
I'm done, man. I don't need the final word today.
Great to hear from you, John. Thanks for that call. Oh, I got to turn off the voice call first when I hear that. So the anti-Semitism claims really are weak. They're weak at best. Let's go back to another video. This is in Pennsylvania. This is at a some sort of town hall. And I think it was, again, another kind of let's all try to kumbaya, let's all get along. And here's what one man at the event had to say.
Every Muslim is a terrorist. Period. Right now. Shut your mouth. I don't want to hear your mouth.
Oh, please.
I'm done with you.
All right, so this is what we're facing, right? I mean, this is what we have in our society. And they say we, I'm not Muslim, but I mean, this is the kind of virulent hate. Shut your mouth. Every Muslim is a terrorist. This is very obvious, easily seen, easily found, documented Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hate in our society. Where's the comparison? From the river to the sea? They said from the river to the sea. It hurt my feelings. Is that? Do you think those are remotely comparable?
Nobody wants your evil cult in this capital. Right. And I'll tell you what. Right. Let me tell you what. I will do everything in my power to make sure that does not happen.
All right, so again, not a one-off. This big galoot, or whatever word you want to use to describe him, is getting applause. You are terrorists. Every one of you are terrorists. I don't want you in my town. This is, I mean, it's ugly. It's hideous. And I understand, let's be fair. Let's recognize that this is not what Jewish people face in our society. What do they face? So we'll go back to the University of Maryland because this was well documented. And there aren't that many areas where I can find clear-cut cases of group Jew hatred, right? Hatred against Jews. You do have the case very well documented in Cornell where the man threatened to kill 3 Jewish students. And it's scary. It's very scary. But it's one person. It's not a group of folks protesting in a progressive city like Rockville or a town hall where everyone's calling you a terrorist. It's not the same.
The University of Maryland is condemning anti-Semitic messages spotted around campus. They were written after a rally yesterday, and now an investigation is underway to find those responsible.
So what are those messages?
News 4's Megan McGrath is live in College Park with the details. Good morning, Megan.
Well, good morning. Students at the University of Maryland gathered on campus last Thursday, or rather on Thursday, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, the demonstration was sponsored by a group called Students for Justice in Palestine. At some point, chalk was used to write anti-Semitic graffiti.
So we saw the Holocaust already. Obviously, that's simply a reference to the current atrocity, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, the what you will that Israel is practicing in Gaza. It cannot be fairly considered anti-Semitic. What other messages?
Graffiti on the pavement. Now you're looking at cell phone pictures of some of the graffiti that was found.
Save Gaza, not from Hamas, from Israel. Okay. Not seeing any anti-Semitism there. Are you? I'm not.
They included political statements like stop genocide and protect Gaza from Israel. But there were also other messages that invoked the Holocaust.
All right, Israel ethnic clean. Isn't that what's happening? This says Israel kills kids. Is that in dispute? Don't we know that they're killing kids? Is there any doubt? How is that anti-Semitic? How is that anti-Semitic? Was it anti-German in 1944 to say Germany kills Jews?
Ethnic cleansing and what appeared to target Jews more broadly. Now, a statement released by the university.
Well, so they did have, and I want to just show, because this is the one thing I saw that did give me pause. So I want to just, I try so hard to be fair to everyone and see every side to every issue. That's a real side. So the Israel kills kids. Let's see what we can
broadly. Now, a statement released.
So you could see it sort of faded out, but someone did chalk Jews. But even the word Jews didn't say kill Jews. It didn't say Jews are evil. Jews are terror. It didn't say anything like that. So this is nothing compared to what we've seen against Muslims. The hatred against Muslims is so much more profound and terrifying. And I call on my fellow Jews to condemn it and not to try to play, everyone, we all are victims here. And, I can condemn one and the other. No, because what people are calling anti-Semitism just really isn't. There is anti-Semitism out there, but what we're hearing over and over is these outbreaks of anti-Semitism. It's just not true. Which is not documented. All right. One of the stories that I've really followed and have focused on is what happened in Harvard with this professor, Claudine Gay, who became president last summer. And not even president for, I guess, half a year maybe, when she was unceremoniously pushed out. And I've never said, if you go back and watch my video, because I'm not a supporter of Dr. Gay. I don't think she, from what I've read, and I'm not an expert in her field, which I guess is political science. I'm not really an expert in any field, law. She wasn't a standout. She wasn't somebody whose record screamed president of Harvard. She had an award-winning undergraduate thesis at Stanford in economics, which I'm impressed very much by. She had an award-winning thesis as a graduate PhD student at Harvard, which I'm somewhat impressed by, but because the topic was DEI, because the topic was a focus on why we need more people of color, more BIPOC, people without a focus on the real issue, which the real injustice in our society and our world, certainly as I see it, which is simply inequality. Simply some people having everything and others having nothing. And some of the people who have everything are people of color. I mean, they just are. So that to me is the real crime in the world today. The real great crime is how a few people have taken everything from themselves. And that's not what, I think what Dr. Gay, her scholarship actually doesn't challenge that, the 1%. It changes the dialogue. So instead of focusing on wealth and income inequality, we focus on gender, race, sex inequality. And that's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to simply change a few of the faces at the top. And that is not a solution, in my opinion. The solution is everyone has enough and no one has too much. Do I think she should have been fired from Harvard? I really don't care. I mean, this has been my attitude all along. I really don't care. I don't think she should have been hired. I think her hiring reflects a moral void at the center of that university. I think that, and I say that based on her refusal to champion Palestinians. I base that on her refusal to call out the professor's wife who harassed a Palestinian student. I say that based on her failure to stand up when she was under questioning by a bigot, Elise Stefanik, in Congress, her failure to call her out, her lies out, her false assumptions out. So I don't really care. What I do understand is the people who pushed her out also have bad motives. And a good example of that is this guy, Bill Ackman, who I think he's one of the Harvard Corporation big shots, mockers, whatever term you want to use. He is now going after the Business Insider, Ackman is, and everyone at MIT, because Business Insider published proof that, or certainly examples, I should say, of his wife plagiarizing, his wife Neri Oxman. And so, I mean, the irony here is really rich. This guy Ackman pushed hard to get rid of Gay. And I don't think he was necessarily wrong on the narrow charge of plagiarism. I've said her academic work was not impressive. She did copy and paste. She did rely on the work of others and didn't correctly attribute it. So if you want to discharge her from the presidency, go ahead. But he did it because she wasn't sufficiently pro-Israel. She wasn't sufficiently anti-Palestinian. She wasn't sufficiently Islamophobic. So I'm perfectly okay with his wife, getting called out for plagiarism as well. And of course, this bastard, rather than saying, okay, yeah, what's fair is fair. I went after Gay. Now I have to take my medicine, take my lumps. If my wife is also a plagiarizer, well, then she needs to go too. A plagiarist, she needs to go too. But of course, he doesn't do that. He's lashing out. So this is the state of elite institutions in America. The plagiarism among their professors, among their leadership is rampant. What matters is that you have the support of the billionaire runners of the billionaires who donate and who run the institutions. That's what matters. It doesn't matter. Your scholarship doesn't matter. And in fact, if you take on the cause of the poor, the struggling, the downtrodden, the oppressed, the persecuted, you're less likely to keep your job. So that's colleges, universities in America today. The top schools. Pretty depressing, isn't it? Pretty pathetic, isn't it? So I mentioned I don't like people who claim the mantle of victimhood. Maybe Dr. Gay shouldn't have been pushed out, right? Her plagiarism was pretty de minimis. It may well be, as Brianna Joy Gray often claims, that lots of, or at least we don't know, there's plenty of other plagiarism. In fact, we just saw it at MIT. I don't feel like because one speeder gets away, you let the next speeder go too. But I really have zero sympathy for Dr. Gay. And in fact, she's still keeping her $900,000 job. She's still teaching at Harvard. She's just not going to be president anymore. This is the kind of response. I'm going to play this from Simone Sanders that just totally gets my goat. This insistence on being a victim, even when you're totally privileged and everything is handed to you. And to be claiming, or you're getting, even if it wasn't handed you, to get so much more and live so much better than just about everyone else, and then to claim you're a victim, it just drives me friggin' wild. Just like the student at the University of Maryland said, I feel unsafe because someone wrote Israel kills babies. Well, they do. Or Israel kills kids. They do. No one was threatening to kill you. No one was threatening to cut off your head. No one was calling you a terrorist, but you're the victim. No, you're not. Let's hear Sanders.
Writing, having now seen how quickly the truth can become a casualty amid controversy, I'd urge a broader caution. At tense moments, every one of us... This is, again, Sanders quoting Dr. Gay's op-ed in the New York Times. How quickly the truth can become a casualty. What truth was the casualty? See, this is the thing. It's not about me. It's about something bigger. But of course it's about her. What is the truth? There was no truth that was a casualty there. You did, in fact, cite others' work without attributing it to it correctly. You did. There's no question about it. And you didn't stand up to a congressional bully. You didn't turn the tables on her. You did provide lawyerly answers that weren't really responsive to BS questions. What truth was the casualty, Dr. Gay? Us must be more skeptical than ever of the loudest and most extreme voices in our culture, however well organized or well connected they might be. And
that's the great irony, because the well organized and well connected voices in the culture were also the ones who put you in charge, who said you deserve it. You should be the president of Harvard. You're well organized. You're well connected. You've got somebody on MSNBC speaking up for you. And I would have no issue about that. That's great. Media should stand up for people who aren't well organized and well connected, but they don't. No one's speaking up for the Palestinians at MSNBC. Well, they did, right? What was his name? He got fired. He got fired, the guy who did that. I forget his name now. It's terrible. But anyway, Mehdi Hassan, fired, right. You could stand up for the Palestinians. That's where the tragedy is, that he got fired. Unlike, and I don't even have any sympathy for him because he was always carrying water for rich, powerful elites as well. You didn't even get fired, Dr. Gay.
What happened to Claudine Gay is chilling. It is part of a larger war on diversity, on history, on Black people in this country, people of color.
It's just all BS. You can't even, again, she's the victim. Black people are the victim. No, the reason Dr. Gay got pushed out is very, very simple. She didn't sufficiently condemn Palestinians. She didn't attack the Gazans, the pro-Palestine position. She wasn't sufficiently pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. That's why she lost her job. And to say anything else is ridiculous. And no, it isn't. Because she handed her opponents a weapon. She did. They went after her, not because she plagiarized, but because she wasn't sufficiently pro-Israel, because she didn't bend her knee quite as much as they wanted her to the billionaire class. But she did plenty of knee bending. And that's what happened. And what a black eye for American academia. So I'm sort of interested in all this stuff with schools. So how fake, how phony this whole college application thing is. I'm not going to tell you what school this is, but this is a school that presents itself as highly competitive, top university. And look at that. Their acceptance rate is 11%. That seems incredibly hard, right? Only 1 out of every 9 or so applicants gets in. The early decision acceptance rate, over 2/3. So what's going on here? Because if you say you're going to go to this university, if you commit to it, they'll take you. They'll take just about anyone. They'll take 2/3 of the people who apply. If they commit, if they say, I'm going to go here, we'll take you. Now, why do they do that? Because the U.S. News and World Report ratings are based very, very significantly on what they call yield and what they call acceptance rate. The higher the yield, the more prestigious. The lower the acceptance rate, the more prestigious. Yield means what percentage of people that you offer admissions to go to your university, matriculate at your university. So if you say, I'm applying to this school, early decision, you swear, you sign on the bottom line saying, I'm going to go there if I'm accepted. That means the yield of people who apply early decision is 100%. Well, every school wants 100% yield. I might be wrong here. I believe that only maybe there's 2, 3, 4 schools with over a 50% yield. In other words, over half the students who are accepted actually attend. Harvard is definitely one. Stanford, Yale, Princeton, I think all are around that 49, 50, 51% rate. The problem for those schools is that all of them, even Princeton, which I think some consider even more competitive than Harvard, are in Harvard shadow. So students who are accepted both Princeton and Harvard are more likely to attend Harvard than Princeton. So the way you get around that, the way you get around the fact that you're the students that you think are most qualified, best GPA, nice good college essay, impressive credentials, the way you get around the problem that they might not like you is you say to them, we'll only accept you if you say you'll go to us. When you're looking at schools for yourself or for your kids or your grandkids, bear that in mind. The schools that have the highest yields and the lowest acceptance rates are very often just gaming the system. It really has nothing to do with the quality of education offered at those schools or even what the kids who apply want. Because I think it's very fair to say, well, if I'm trying to decide between Harvard and Stanford, more people who get into Harvard go to Harvard than go to Stanford. That may really suggest that there's something better about Harvard. I'm not saying that's the only thing to look at, but it's relevant. It's pertinent. But if the only reason they're going to a school or the main reason they're going is because they have to go, and it's meaningless. All of our institutions right now, they're all corrupt, root and branch. This is what happens. This is what happens when you have no more center. When there's just rich and poor and just a few kind of managerial people in the middle. And they're really aspiring to be at the top. So why would you, if you're the president of a university, what's your benefit? Well, if you can get your school to be considered a top 5, top 10, top 20, then the kids who go there, they make more money, they give more money to your institution, endowment goes up, and guess who gets a raise? Guess who gets a bonus? It's not about improving the education. It's not about guaranteeing all the information, the knowledge they need to be good citizens. It's just about positioning your university so that you look good. That's what our institutions are all about. That's where we are. And that is chilling. All right, a final one point. So we yesterday, just last get to this, because again, I said I don't like it when people claim victimhood, claim victim status. I do like it when people champion victims, when they do stand up for somebody different than themselves. Not that they wrap themselves the way Simone Sanders talked about how she, an incredibly privileged woman, an incredibly privileged person who, makes a living talking, gets paid millions, I believe, for talking, to suddenly to claim all black women are victims. No, you're not a victim. No, Simone Sanders, you're not a victim. No, Dr. Clayton Gay, you're not a victim. But African Americans, many are victims. It is tougher in many ways to be black in America today. And they have less, African Americans are less affluent and they make less money, along with a number of other groups. So if you champion it, poor, struggling, and working people, that's great. You should do that. That's just not what our media does. Even those who are supposedly there, presumably, to champion victims. Arlen brought this to our attention yesterday. The Jamel Bowie piece, which is, why is it at the bottom? It shouldn't be at the bottom somehow. I must have moved this around. So Jamel Bowie, who is an African-American black columnist at the New York Times, wrote about why Trump should be barred from the ballot as an insurrectionist. And I didn't really spend a lot of time commenting on this. I let Arlen do it. It was his program for sure. And I'm not saying Bowie's wrong. I think there's really a decent argument both ways. And as I've said repeatedly, I see both sides of this one. Whether he should be barred from the ballot is where I see both sides of it. I'm not clear on that. But it's finger pointing. It's look at the bad guy over there. Not what's wrong with my tribe. What's wrong with my side. And I'm not saying Bowie's tribe is African Americans. I'm saying it's elites. It's Democratic elites. I would love it. Why don't we have from Jamel Bowie? And I get, he can write about whatever he wants. If this is what he wants, if he wants to write about insurrection, go ahead. And I'm not saying it's not an important topic. It is. But why is there nothing? And I Googled this. I wanted to see, has he written about this at all? Bowie's black. Isn't he curious why so many black, Hispanic young voters are abandoning Joe Biden? Wouldn't he because he so clearly is all in for Joe Biden. He wants Trump barred from the ballot. He can't stand Trump. He thinks Trump is so evil. His actions were so bad. He needs to be blocked from the ballot. Maybe he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong, but it's clear this is motivated by very, very strong dislike, animus for opposition to Trump. So why isn't he asking, well, what's going on with, my tribe, right? My race of people. Why don't they see things the same way I do? Why don't poor, struggling, presumably poor, struggling, working class blacks, Hispanics, young voters, how come they don't see things the way I, a privileged, powerful, influential New York Times columnist, does? And you might say, well, hell, it's not fair. You're not being fair. So you took one column from Bowie. You haven't looked at all of his work. Maybe he's written some columns where he has talked about the appeal that Trump has, not just to whites, but to other voters as well. Yeah, and I looked into that, and there aren't any. There's not one. Bowie's never wondered. He's never asked himself the question why voters of color might be drawn to Trump. especially when you'd think he would, because he's made it so clear that Trump is an anti-black candidate. So I would just question, how come you're not asking that question, Bowie? Don't you think that might be of interest? But he can't ask it because it would be there would then be recognition that this is a duopoly, that elites in both parties and the media aren't on your side, aren't on the side of working people, that basically you're on your own. So this is an opinion he wrote back in 2019. Trump voters aren't the only voters, they're in the minority. Why are Democratic leaders so obsessed with him? And he goes on to say that what they should be, what the media should focus in on, is black voters. He talks about how Trump is a racist. He routed his base using racist demagoguery. That's how he won. Well, if that's your position, Bowie, isn't it incredibly interesting to you that this racist demagogue has support, more and more support from black voters? How come you're not curious about that? Wouldn't you think he would ask himself? I mean, I would. I'm very curious about that. But Bowie can't be bothered. He can't be bothered to talk to black voters who might be interested in Donald Trump, curious about Trump. And he clearly, again, Bowie, this is Bowie here, the one who says Trump needs to be blocked because he's an insurrectionist. Bowie is incredibly focused on black voters. He says the Democrat Party's success is based on mobilizing and winning over black Americans. And yet, when they're losing, when the Democratic Party is losing black voters, Bowie is utterly silent. There's no analysis provided. Our institutions are corrupt. They're controlled by the billionaire elites. Doesn't matter whether it's your colleges and universities, your newspapers, the media, when it reports that from the river to the sea is the same as we will cut off your heads. You want more of this? Do me a favor, click subscribe. You're going to get it one way or the other. I'm not going anywhere, folks. I love doing this. I love talking to John and anyone else who had a great time with Arlen yesterday. But hey, do me a solid. Click subscribe, click like. And I will be back tomorrow. Barry Lynn from Americans United for Separation of Church and State, retired now. Barry Lynn from Culture Shocks. He'll be with us. And I'm, again, hoping against hope we'll get Interfaith Voices wrap on as well.